Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, "Abuse me for saying your restaurant gave me food poisoning?" We'll see how that turns out. This happened almost a week ago, but there's a bit of context necessary for this. The manager, we'll call him Angry AA, of this particular restaurant used to be a church leader of mine about 6 years ago. We got along reasonably well, but he got busy juggling management of a few different hospitality establishments around our city, and I've only seen him for a collective 10 minutes in the past 4 years. While I understand he's a busy man, I've always expressed interest in catching up if he ever has time. However, I stopped making an effort about a year ago when he stopped responding, and he deleted me from Facebook about 4 months ago. Fast forward to last week when it happened. After a long day of work, I stopped to one of his restaurants. I'd stopped in the day before around the same time and had a poor experience, but I tend to give restaurants a second chance before I write them off. I had a worse experience that day. To cut a long story short, I ended up vomiting my meal up on the side of the road an hour after eating there and posted a review on their Facebook page hoping they would take my feedback on board and work to improve. I thought, like any reputable restaurant would do, they'd take my feedback and move forward. Worst case, AA might attempt to message my Facebook and get some more info on what went wrong. Instead, AA tracked down my phone number and sent me a number of abusive voicemail and text messages, saying how I was ducking with his business because he didn't have time to hang out with me, which is a complete joke. I don't even have time to duck up my own life, let alone anyone else's. Anyway, I got sick of his abusive messages, so I blocked his number. Couple minutes later, I got calls from his younger brother's phone, cross-referenced by searching the number on Facebook, and another number I didn't recognize. Blocked both numbers. Got friend requests on Facebook, blocked. At this point it died down and I thought he'd taken the hint. In hindsight, this could have been avoided if I contacted him directly about the issue, but at the same time I'd had no luck contacting AA about anything in the past and firmly believed contacting their Facebook page would be the best way to provide feedback. Besides, this was nothing to do with a past friendship breakdown and all to do with a business not meeting expectations and making a customer sick. The next day I woke to another abusive message, this time on Instagram, saying how I was a keyboard warrior who suffers from tall poppy syndrome, i.e. accusing me of trying to tear him down because he runs 3 businesses and I'm supposedly jealous because he doesn't have time to hang out with me. At that point I started taking screenshots of everything, tracked down a contact email for his HR department and sent a formal complaint. Although I didn't send any screenshots at the time, I ended my email with, "I have plenty of screenshots and a copy of his abusive voice messages should you wish to investigate this further." Not even 2 hours later, I got an email from him thanking me for my feedback, apologizing for the poor service I received initially, as if that was the reason I emailed HR, begging forgiveness, and best of all, "You have my contact details. I'd love if you would reach out because a friendship isn't worth losing over a poor business experience," implying I was the reason we'd fallen out of contact when I'm the only one who made an effort to stay in touch. That was the icing on the cake. The next one is titled, "Evicting Horrible Neighbors." This is a story from a few years ago, where I was living in a small apartment in East London. I used to live in an even smaller studio apartment, and I was absolutely thrilled to be able to rent an apartment with actual rooms for the first time. It was in a small apartment block, just 3 stories high. The building was pretty old, you could sometimes hear your neighbors, but it wasn't such a big problem. I had a living room, that was enough for me. Anyway, when I moved in, this lovely couple lived upstairs. The only time I heard noise from them was when they were packing and moving, as is expected. They moved away and for a few weeks, there was complete silence in the apartment. One day when I came back from work, I heard all kinds of noises. A kid running around, a woman yelling, things being thrown around, loud footsteps. Oh! Looks like a family moved in upstairs. I was really surprised at the amount of noise that was coming from them. But I told myself to relax, just let them settle in and unpack. Surely, when school rolls around in a few weeks, it should be perfectly fine. Oh, how wrong I was. It wasn't only the child and mother who were the problem. There was also a man, presumably the father, boyfriend, partner. He was a big angry-looking man. I first heard him when I came home to them having really loud porn-style sex with their windows open. You could hear them from the street. He wasn't always around, he would come over maybe a few nights in the week. He always sounded angry, and through the poor sound isolation and the loudness of his voice, I could always hear strong cuss words coming from upstairs. From this point onwards, I would be assaulted every single day with the horrible noise from upstairs. Child crying, mother screaming and swearing at him, dog running around barking, father screaming and swearing. I was starting to get really stressed out, as I never had a moment of peace. I would always hear them. Loud music? Check. Loud TV? Check. I consulted with some other neighbors quietly and they all told me the same thing: keep a noise diary and report it to the council. And so I did. I recorded everything that was unacceptable. The loud movies at 2 a.m., the club music in the middle of the day, the arguing, the swearing, everything. I also called the NSPCC to notify them of the fact that the child gets sworn at very frequently. I finally forwarded it all to the local council, my landlord and their landlord. Unfortunately, nothing happened. I learned that they were council tenants renting a private property, so the council was extremely reluctant to do anything. The landlord attempted to serve a notice to quit, but they simply ignored it. And when it was known to them that someone had complained against them, they guessed it was me and made my life even more difficult. Maybe I'm just imagining it, but there was more petty noise, stomping above my bedroom late in the night for example. There were also more petty things, garbage in my mailbox, blue tack over my doorbell, etc. I suspect they also stole my mail, Amazon packages, but I had no proof. Fortunately for me, they had no idea what I looked like. I was taking a lot of care to make sure that I never encountered them, or let them see my face. That all changed when there was a plumbing problem between my and their apartments. The plumber came to my property to see the hole, mushrooms growing in my ceiling. To my complete horror, a few days later, I heard him refer to me as the Japanese lady, revealing my ethnicity and identity as everyone else in the apartment block was Caucasian. And then the shitstorm happened. One night, I was coming home late with a friend. We had a great evening and I was in a really good mood for once. I encountered the woman on the staircase, who obviously recognized me immediately. She started yelling abuse and racial slurs in the corridor at me. I ran up to my apartment and I had no idea what to do. I asked my friend to stay the night so I was not alone in this situation. I called the police the next day and explained everything to them when they visited me. The police officers, with my permission, went up to talk to them. Now, with a police report, a humongous noise diary, and many other tenants making similar complaints, the council finally had to listen to me. I had a welcomed work trip abroad for a week and when I came back home, it was eerily silent. I spoke to my neighbor living across from me and she told me that the woman moved out one afternoon and that was that. Victory. Although it was a really horrible year living in constant noise and paranoia, a well-documented case of the constant garbage coming out of the upstairs apartment won out in the end. The next one is titled, "Drop Out on Me Last Minute." Enjoy requalifying for your job. Not me, but my mum, and she didn't take revenge, but revenge was foisted upon her. It's almost pro-revenge, but not quite. Is it pro-revenge to fire a cashier for taking money from the register? In that instance, I'd argue not. But I still think some extra effort was engaged in to really grind the lesson home here. You be the judge. My mum is a substitute teacher. There is a phone pool system that distributes the jobs to the pool of subs, but teachers are allowed to select subs that they think work particularly well with their class. This is the key to repeat business as a sub. Do a good job with a teacher's class, and she'll put you on her short list of teachers she wants to sub for her when she's out. Teachers like having good subs they click with and that click with their students. It puts them at ease, so subs use being picked at random and clicking with a teacher to build their network and get more reliable regular work. Of course teachers get sick, too, so sometimes the call goes out the morning of, but usually when teachers schedule a day off they reserve one of their favorite shortlist subs a week in advance. My mum is on several teachers' shortlists, so she has work probably 3 days a week, sometimes more. Important to note, this means good subs usually have a day or two booked into next week already, sometimes more. About 10 years ago, a teacher asked my mother to take her class for a Tuesday afternoon, and she accepted. This was a couple weeks in advance. About a week or so later, a teacher from a different district offered my mum a full week of work. This is very lucrative, and my mum really wanted the job. She tried to take Monday and the last 3 days, but clearly that would have been more disruptive than necessary. The teacher just said that's okay, she'll see if Carol can take it. The next name on her short list. No, my mum said, I'll make it work. Okay, thanks. My mum ended up cancelling her Tuesday afternoon gig, and taking the week-long job. In her mind, she'd just call the teacher and explain how lucrative the week-long gig was, and the other teacher would understand. The other teacher most certainly did not understand. With the short notice, the subs on her short list were all booked. She called my mother and asked her to fulfill her commitment. My mum realizes this bridge is burning pretty badly and doesn't want to cancel her lucrative gig and burn 2 bridges, so she declines. The teacher had no choice but to take a rando from the pool of subs and just hope for the best. Teacher equals upset. So, obviously, teacher is scratching my mum from her short list. But it doesn't end there. The teacher spreads the story of my mum's unreliability across the school to her fellow teachers, and my mother ends up getting nuked off of everyone's short list. Basically, the school stops calling and asking my mum for preferred assignments. This is worse than it sounds. My mum works for multiple school districts, and there are multiple schools in a district, so you wouldn't think it would have a huge impact. But it's structured so that if you work X amount of hours in a district, you qualify for the district and you get paid more, and it's easier to get jobs, you move up to a new sub-pool or something. Yeah, it's kind of geometric. The point is, you have to have so many hours a month to qualify for the better pay and the better jobs. Well, my mum was pretty heavily invested in this school, so much so that without it, she lost her qualification for the district. Her pay took a nosedive, and soon other schools in the district stopped calling. She was still on their short lists, but she lost her favored pool status, and so the random jobs weren't coming in very frequently. My mum spent the rest of the school year trying to claw her way back into qualification. Eventually she had to take jobs in classrooms with lots of troubled kids and lots of stress in order to re-qualify, so that she could expand her network across the other, better, schools that she hadn't been torched at. It wasn't until the next school year that my mum was able to re-network with other schools and re-qualify and get her pay back to normal. My mum will be the first person to tell you that she messed up. She screwed that teacher over and deserved getting blacklisted, and I certainly don't disagree. I'm not sure if she's ever made her way back to that school yet. It's been 10 years, I should ask her. I guess we'd have to be back on talking terms to do that though. The next one is titled, Crochet Revenge. People just don't seem to want to cross me anymore. Probably because they know I'm vengeful. This gal apparently doesn't know that. I'm huge into crochet. My earliest memory of crocheting is from about age 7 with my grandmother. She couldn't do it anymore, but I wanted to learn, so she started teaching me. I've been crocheting for 20 years. And I've gotten good in the last 12 or so. I had a woman in my neighborhood looking for someone to crochet some baby booties from patterns she's had since the 80s, so we talked and came to an agreement on price, $15 per pair and such. I figured this would be a good starting place since I've decided to open an Etsy store, or something like it, to sell what I make. We meet and I start the first pair after deciding on color combination. They look very 70s, but they're not for me, so what do I care? I deliver the first pair and she loves them. All is well, and she gives me a copy of one of her patterns. The first was one of mine. The next morning I get a text. I'm not going to word for word just because I don't want her finding this somehow, but basically it goes like this. These aren't the same size. I want you to make me a new pair and I want them in the next size up. Me, okay, I will do that, but you have to return the pair you have to me. She didn't get witchy with me, but I'm a little irritated at this point because she loved them the day before. I also know they are indeed the same size. I measure them, however I'm not going to fight her on them over the phone. We set up a time to meet today an hour beforehand. She calls me and cancels. Okay, now I'm mad. I'm a stay-at-home mum and I arranged my toddler's whole day around this meeting, but whatever. I was prepared for this meeting with my measuring tape and some agreements for her to sign because I'm not going to lose money on this deal between us. And she had me sign an agreement that I wouldn't use the patterns she had to make any more booties and sell them to other people. I wasn't going to do any more pairs until she signed what I had as well. Maybe not going to hold up in a courtroom, but it's better than nothing, and I want something to point at if she tries this again and I can say nope. Now for my revenge. She thinks she patterns are super special and can't be found anywhere because she bought them in the 80s and there's no way they still sell them. After all, she can't find them. Obviously I'm not going to use the copies she gives me because then I would be going against my word that I won't. What she doesn't know is after all of 10 minutes of Googling I found the company. They still exist and they still sell these exact patterns. I can get all 10 of her precious patterns for $5.99 and even some extra ones she doesn't have. So I did. And now I'm going to make and sell the good from these patterns. I already double-checked with the company that I can do this. So the next time she contacts me and I go to get a pattern from her, I'm going to tell her I don't need it because I bought my own. It's petty, but I will greatly enjoy crushing her fantasy that her patterns are so special and rare that nobody can find them anymore. I hope it breaks her just a little bit. The next one is titled, Lawyer Disbarred for Screwing Me. I've had a rough past 2 years, was living in British Columbia and got my girlfriend, now fiancée, pregnant, and we had a beautiful little boy. Had to go back to the States, because I overstayed on my visa and was given trouble at the border when I tried to go back. My fiancé couldn't leave the baby and he was too small to travel, so we wait a few months and decide to get my permanent residency. Her cousin knew a lawyer and recommended her, thought this would be the solution. The nightmare begins. We forked over $6,000 and began the process, months of paperwork going back and forth and all the usual hoops you jump through. Coming to the end of it, the lawyer forgets to get a few key papers, like sponsorship paperwork and minor other things. I thought, okay, this isn't a big deal, we can get this all turned in and get back on track. The first red flag hit me when she started talking about the illegals and how if I crossed over that it wouldn't be a big deal and I could be with my family. I had to tell my lawyer that was not a good idea. Fast forward a month later and my paperwork finally clears the consulate in Seattle and is en route to my home. I get a phone call from my crying fiancé when it hadn't showed up when we expected, and she called to find out why. She tells me the lawyer called the consulate and said that I wanted the address changed to my fiancé in BC and to send it there. I immediately called her and said I didn't approve of this and that she lied to the consulate, who we promptly informed. She then proceeds to tell me that I need to illegally sneak across the border and get it from my fiancé and that everything will be fine since my packet has my PR card and number. I was speechless and explained to her my issues. 1. This is illegal. 2. What about all the stuff I have to move? 3. Why did you do something without my consent that wasn't necessary? 4. Won't this get me in trouble? She honestly had no good points and donkey punched herself in the taint with her words. Fiancé and I had contacted the firm after and told them everything. Apparently she got 3 people banned from Canada by doing what she tried to with us and was on probation of sorts with the firm. Later that day we got a call from them informing us that she had been fired and they would be following up to get her disbarred. We explained everything to the consulate as well. Judging by the actions the firm made in compensating our whole case tells me something must have been said in conversation with the consulate. So we got my permanent residency for free, got our lawyer fired and later disbarred from law practice, and our family is happily together. Currently planning the wedding. I also found out later she actually went to jail for negligence and some other charges. I didn't let the lawyer cheat me and she hung herself, I just gave her the rope. Oh, I should mention that the cases she worked where the 3 people got banned were overturned due to her incompetence. The last one is titled, Bar and Grill Manager. So one day while visiting family in the state over, my uncles, aunts, parents went to some fancy steak place, leaving us kids behind and in need of food. Now my oldest brother, 22, and the next oldest was myself, 18, beyond the rest of the party was all over the age of 14 and there was around 12 of us. We decided to go out to this sports bar and grill right down the road because they had a $1 burger promotion. So we get there, get seated, and start ordering our food, drinks. This is where the problem comes in. My brother decided to order some alcohol cause he wanted to and I could drive home anyways. The waiter asks for his ID, he provides it. She then tells him that she's not allowed to check it and that only the manager can. The waiter seems new, kinda weird, but whatever. The manager comes back 5 minutes later and asks for a second form of ID. Whatever, he has one. She goes in the back to check the IDs and comes back 10 minutes later. She tells him that she won't accept the IDs and he won't be served any alcohol. My brother responds with, "Oh, I totally understand. I'm with my younger cousins and all, probably seems kinda weird." At which point she starts trying to come up with some reason why he won't be served while denying that it's because of the people he is with. After spewing some stupid things about how his ID is fake, it's not, she settles on that his ID is too flimsy. She then repeated this fact like 4 times. At which point I pulled out my driver's license, same materials slightly different designs cause I'm under 21, and show it to her to try to prove that all of the licenses from that state were like that. She says that she used to live in home state bordering the state we were in 10 years ago and her ID was never like that. They changed the IDs like 5 years ago. Now at this point there are 3 people from the restaurant standing at our table, the manager, the waiter, and the bartender, all passing around my ID and my brother's ID. Eventually the manager says, "I'm done talking, I'm not serving you. If you really care about this, get the cops out here and have them check your license." At which point she stormed off and the bartender returned to the bar, like 20 feet away. At this point we were mad at this manager because she was talking down to us the whole time. Also, why would she ask for more forms of ID if she wasn't going to accept them? We looked up online if there was any way to double check an ID for validity without having to get an officer. There isn't. We then called the non-emergency police number to see if they could send an officer whenever convenient for them. They told us that to get an officer to come out we would have to call 911. So I did. It was kinda weird talking to the operator telling her that everything was fine, no one was hurt, and no one was in danger. They had a whole line of questions it seemed like they had to ask, first and only time I ever called 911. Eventually they said that there was an officer nearby that wasn't doing anything important so they would send him. My brother and I go outside to wait for the officer. After 5 minutes he pulls up, we explain the situation to him, and he checks my brother's license. We are still outside at this point. Everything checks out and we head inside with the officer to tell her. When she notices us walk in she immediately moves the conversation to the back of the restaurant, near where we were seated with our cousins. The officer explains to her that everything checks out and that the only possible way it could be fake is if my brother looked a hell of a lot similar to someone who was 22 and he was using his license, also that he memorized all that lookalikes information. The manager says, "Wait, so I can't get in any legal trouble serving him alcohol?" The cop assures her yes, also he gave her this look like, "Why the duck would you get in trouble for this?" She then starts spewing off stuff trying to explain herself to the cops, at which point she says, "He just looks kinda young and he is with a bunch of 8-year-olds. It was hidden in with all the same bullcrap excuses she gave to us earlier, like his ID being too flimsy, but we heard it. Cop leaves, she tells the waiter to serve her my brother, and our food finally arrives. Yes, this 45 minutes in and just getting our food. Didn't see the manager come out of the back for the rest of our meal. Thanks for listening.